Data settings primarily relate to how data is set, interacted with between other field data, or saved to the server. Use data settings to do things like set default values or set up data calculation. The multiple value setting introduces a Add Another button beneath the field, enabling users to input multiple sets of data for that field. This data is stored as an array within the submission. The default value setting automatically sets a value for the field when the form is rendered. Configuring this setting will look different depending on the component type. For example, setting a default value for an input component like a text field or number will be manually set, while other components like a select or radio component, you'll manually select the value for your default value. If this default value is left unchanged when the form is submitted, the value will be saved with the submission. The persistent setting will change how the field data is submitted by the front-end application and stored by the back-end server. Server is the default setting for each field and is the expected behavior for submitting data, where data is submitted by the front-end application and saved to the back-end server. The client setting will submit the data from the front end to the server, however, the server will not store the data. This can be beneficial when the server needs to intercept the data for workflows such as logic or calculation, but there's no need to store that data on the server side. When none is set, the front end will not submit the data, and in turn the back end will not store the data. You can use this setting if client-side logic is needed without the requirement of sending or saving data to the server. Use the protected setting to prevent field data from being queried by an API call, and this will also provide an extra layer of protection for sensitive data. Database index will configure the database to index the field when called upon, increasing server-side performance when querying submissions. This can be helpful when dealing with fields that have a large dataset or submissions. The truncate multiple spaces setting removes multiple spaces between words or characters within the field. The encrypted setting is available within the security module package and adds a server-side two-way encryption layer to the field. Redraw on refreshes the component when a change occurs on the form. The options allow the component to redraw when any changes occur on the form or when a change occurs on a specific component. This is useful when interpolating data for calculations or logic when dynamic changes happen on the form. Here I have a user ID field that's going to interpolate the data of a name field and populate it into its label. That's only going to happen whenever there's a change that occurs on the name field, so we have redraw on set to enter name. If I scroll over to my form, as I type into this name field, the user ID is going to redraw based on those changes and then populate that data into its label. Enabled by default, the clear values when hidden setting will remove the value of the field if the field becomes hidden on the form. Uncheck this option if you wish to retain the field's value when it's hidden and later redisplayed when using conditional logic. Check the calculate value on server if you would like to bypass the calculations on the front end and run the calculation on the server side only. This is useful if you wish to override the value submitted with the calculations performed on the server side. Allow manual override of calculated values unlocks calculated data so end users can manually override the calculation. Here I have a total field that's calculating the two number fields above it. Typically you would not be able to change this calculation, but when this setting is checked, the user can override the calculation.